active in the social justice protest movement in Israel, which began in the summer of 2012 and is still continuing. Specifically, he is a membership of the Public Housing Struggle Group, which is an Arab-Jewish coalition for social and political change, mainly in Jaffa, Ramallah, and Lod.
Ramla.
Okay, Ramla.
All right. Ramallah is different.
I saw an I. Okay, sorry, Ramla. Sorry, he is also active in the Shikaya.
In what?
In the Shara, Yara Solidarity Movement, which is a socio-political movement struggling towards an end to Israeli-Palestinian conflict and towards civil equality in Israel. And this organization is dedicated to Arab-Jewish cooperation. He is also an active member of the student cell in Tel Aviv University, and he takes part in tours, protests, and other events. Lastly, he is an active member of the Yalla Young Leaders Community, which is an online movement of young leaders from across the Middle East and North Africa region. He is dedicated to dialogue and engagement as a means of securing a safe, productive, and peaceful region through capitalization and the catalyzing power of social networks, media, and technology. This man is also now a cultural diplomat. So let us give Mr. Tom Dolev a big round of applause from the ICD. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, and to my predecessor with the interesting lecture, and for arriving on time to replace me. So let me begin. Hello everyone, distinguished guests, friends, and young leaders. So first of all, I'd like to thank the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy for inviting me here to the 2012 Symposium on Cultural Diplomacy and on International Economics as a representative of the Paris Center for Peace, which is Israel's leading NGO promoting peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors. But I'm here today because for the best part of the last year, I've been involved in an innovative initiative, which you reminded us of, which is Yalla Young Leaders, which was co-founded by the Paris Center for Peace in Israel and a Palestinian NGO called Israeli-Palestinian, and since its birth a year ago has become a vibrant regional online community, and a lot of that has to do with cultural diplomacy, as I hope to show today. So the general subject of my talk is regarding social media as a vessel of public or people-to-people cultural diplomacy, and I hope to discuss through the prism of our initiative the great potential that these modern world technologies and social networks have for us to forward dialogue, communication, and cultural exchange between peoples, to break boundaries, and to reduce divisions between societies. So I'd like to start by touching shortly upon the subject of cultural diplomacy and the reasons I believe it can play a very vital role in the context of peace promotion in the Middle East and North Africa region, and specifically between Israeli and Arab societies. So firstly, looking at the definitions of the term culture, which is therefore relevant to the term of cultural diplomacy, I found a few factors that are very important to understanding cultural diplomacy in our context. The first definition I found was the behaviors and beliefs characteristic of a particular social, ethnic, or age group. So first of all, I think there is an inherent flexibility in the term culture, which is potentially very fruitful, and I believe has been very fruitful in our case. And I mean this in the sense that the term culture allows you to choose to view the world through different prisms or cross-sections of society as sharing or being a part of a common culture. And in this sense, culture is a term which allows you to define people simultaneously as being a part of a common culture and being of a different culture. And this tension between inclusion and exclusion is very fruitful in my mind and allows for a more complex and diverse view of a situation, especially a social or political situation, which is normally viewed from a very dichotomous perspective and that has become rooted and often very unfruitful in the societies that we're discussing. So in the Middle East and North Africa region, and with respect to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a focal point of the problematic Arab-Israeli relations in the region in general, I believe that we have not yet really been able to escape viewing the conflict only from a national perspective. And that's very understandable. It is a national struggle between two peoples. But in my view, approaches to dealing with the conflict have not been innovative enough in the sense of cultural diplomacy. And I say this, as you mentioned, having participated, and I continue to participate in various Israeli-Palestinian groups who make an important effort to deal with the conflict and to bring it to a peaceful resolution. But the truth is that it seems that people in Israel and in Palestine have, to a certain extent, tired of the conflict. And I don't mean this in the physical sense. Obviously, they've tired physically, but with official negotiations and discussions between Israeli and Palestinian governments having for a long time not been giving hope, and with time seem, if anything, to move away from the prospect of resolution, young Israelis and Palestinians have tired of the conflict because it seems to have reached a dead end in terms of resolution, and resolution has come to the point of disbelief in both communities, if not sometimes I should say apathy in the Israeli community. Now with this in mind, I come to the Arab Spring and the wave of protests that started in Tunisia in December 2010 and quickly spread to Egypt, Libya, Yemen, Bahrain, Iraq, Syria, and other countries, and in a sense, and this is debatable, but in a sense also to the social protests in Israel. Now, in all these places, youth demonstrated against social, political, and economic inequalities. They demanded change and a better future, as we know many times, despite extremely violent reactions from the authorities. And they showed their ability to mobilize for greater equality, freedom, and solidarity, with new and social media, and Facebook heading this list, and perhaps also Twitter, as their vital tools to express their thoughts and opinions, and to organize and mobilize on a massive scale. Now to come back to the subject of cultural diplomacy, these uprisings in my mind have shown the potential of a cultural prism that is most fruitful in the Middle East, and that is undoubtedly youth. Progressive and able youth. Youth culture can be the link between young people in the region that is potentially transnational, trans-ethnic, and can transcend conflict. And from this perspective, it is no longer only nation versus nation, Israeli versus Palestinian, or Arab versus Israeli, but it can also be a young generation looking forward for a better future versus an older generation which represses rights, freedoms, and equality. The young representing dialogue and cooperation, and the old inability and ineptitude to overcome a history of conflict. And it is this potential that had initially brought us to the Yale Young Leaders Initiative, which is, as I stated, co-founded by Israeli and Palestinian organizations. So now I'd like to tell you a bit about the Yale Young Leaders Initiative and what we've been doing for the past year. So Yale was founded on May 2011 as a Facebook platform promoting dialogue and engagement as a means to securing, as you said, a safe and peaceful region and a productive region. And the great potential of the young generation as the most fruitful cultural prism for linking both Arab and Israeli societies as well, has proven itself in the amazing growth of our member base, and which in many ways exceeded even our initial expectations. So within a year, Yala is soon reaching 100,000 members online. So I'd like to read to you some of the numbers of regional members. Some of them are more surprising than others. And regional members constitute over 80% of Yala's total member base, and we have an interesting international community that is sometimes fruitful and sometimes unfruitful to discussions, but I'll start with regional members. So over 30,000 Egyptians are the largest group on Yala, 7,500 Algerians, 7,200 Palestinians, 6,000 Jordanians, 5,000 Moroccans, 5,000 Israelis, 4,700 Iraqis, 4,000 Turkish, 4,000 Tunisians, 1,800 Libyans, 1,200 Saudi Arabians, 600 Lebanese, and other smaller groups, which are under 300, from the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. So young people, Arab and Israeli alike, who are truthfully otherwise completely separated, and this is true not only of the larger Arab world, but of Israeli and Palestinian societies as well, most of which do not meet each other than as soldier and potential threat, or occupier and occupied. Through social media are able to engage with each other, and from a standpoint that allows them to see each other not only as other, but as part of a shared community with a shared vision, forward-looking young people. So a bit about social media and the ability of social media to gather large audiences in a rather short time. This for us has been very powerful because despite what we'd wish, these people represent a willingness to dialogue between Israelis and Arabs, are still a minority in the current climate, obviously, in the region. And knowing that they have such a strong support group behind them, let's say they're representing 100,000 people who they know their beliefs are similar, gives them great courage to remain in the group and to keep working and spreading their positive views, even with often unwilling societies. With that being said, obviously there are a few issues regarding the nature of social media groups, and maybe we'll discuss that a bit later, but we do understand at Yalla the importance of moving from, as we say, from screen to streets, and we've started implementing projects, which I'll explain later. But more importantly, the Israeli and Palestinian members of Yalla who can meet physically do meet on a periodic basis, whether in Tel Aviv or in Ramallah, and we're trying to grow that a bit further than the big cities. So it's created very strong connections between Israeli and Palestinian participants who can meet physically. Now, rather than the Arab Spring and social justice protests' use of social media, which was mostly about organizing and mobilizing people, Yalla's use of social media has much more to do with cultural diplomacy. As I mentioned, these young people do not know each other well. They have misconceptions of each other and of each other's culture. And yet, following the Arab Spring and social justice protests in Israel, are intrigued by one another. And this can be seen, for example, in the fact that in the Israeli social protests, people were chanting things like "walk like an Egyptian," for example. So first they must get to know each other rather than organize and mobilize directly. They have to exchange their beliefs, experiences, values, cultures, and many times relearn that they have a lot of common culture. And if we have time in the end, perhaps I'll show a video that has to do with that. So Yalla has been implementing cultural diplomacy in many ways, some of which are more classical cultural diplomacy. For example, we have a partnership with the Barcelona football team, and we've already had 2 delegations of Yalla members, Israeli-Palestinian and general Middle Easterners, go abroad to meet with the team, meet with players, and during the encounter, people who are perhaps less inclined immediately to the values of Yalla, but are more interested, let's say, in Lionel Messi, eventually have the opportunity to meet, and a lot of times once they do, the seed of cooperation and understanding is planted. Now maybe a little anecdote about Messi. We have a core group on Yalla and a steering committee which is made of members from the entire region, and a lot of times when we have to approach difficult issues, here Syria was discussed. We also had lately an issue of administrative detainees in Israel, and Israeli authorities, which we felt and the Palestinians felt we had to discuss. So a lot of times we'd work really hard on thinking about how we put this as Yalla in a fruitful way that will both say what we need to say but raise important discussion, and we'd get a few comments and 100 likes, and then we'd post a picture of Messi having to do with the delegation, and we'd get thousands of likes. So that can be a bit depressing sometimes, but it does say that these cultural superstars really have the ability to bring people together. That being said, as I mentioned, difficult issues need to be tackled and discussed in order for the community to be of true value. And now I think is the time to show you a video. This is an initiative that actually started on the page organically. It was a question posed by a Moroccan member. She's a young woman who actually just 2 weeks ago was live blogging for Yalla at the UN. There was a meeting on the question of Palestine and the role of youth and women. So she basically just posted on the page a question to the Israeli members at Yalla asking about what their thoughts were of a one-state solution, which is a difficult question because most Israelis view the solution as a 2-state solution. And what happened was we have an Israeli-Canadian member named Corey, who is also a photographer and filmmaker, as well as social activist, and he decided to go out on the street and pose this question from Sahar, the Moroccan, to Israeli people and the wider Israeli public, and he posted the responses, and later I'll tell you what he's been doing since.
And this is a question from Sahar in Morocco. Okay. There's a few questions. First is, everyone talks about the 2-state solution to the conflict with Palestinians. What is your view on the one-state solution? Good, bad, meaning everything from the sea to the Jordan is all one country?
I think that should have been the solution from the start, but no one actually came and thought about it. They wanted to like make the division between the two nations.
Okay.
אני חושב שלכל אחד צריך שיהיה את המדינה שלו.
Everyone needs their own country.
כן. מדינה לשני עמים, אתה רוצה שיהיה? לא. כל עם שיהיה לו את המדינה שלו.
So each nation has their own country.
ורק שיהיה שלום בין המדינות, שלא תהיה שנאה.
And once there's peace, then it's okay, we're all together?
עוד פעם?
שיהיה שלום, אז בסדר שכולם יהיו ביחד, כאילו?
מבחינתי כן.
In his opinion, yes.
כן, כן. אם יש שלום...
If there's peace.
אני חושב... אתה תתרגם את זה לאנגלית.
Okay.
שלא משנה אם ערבים נגד יהודים או צרפתים נגד אנגלים.
I don't care if it's Jews against Arabs or French against English.
השינוי צריך לבוא מבפנים.
It has to come from within, that each person...
מבחינת הכנסת כן יהיה שלום, ובתוך הלבבות תהיה שנאה, אז לא עשית...
Because even if we make a political agreement and there is peace, and there's still hate in our hearts, it won't make any difference.
What?
Okay. And who controls?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama? Okay. Okay.
They want to kill us.
All right. So I just want to say that Corey, since it's become quite viral on Yalla and outside of Yalla, and since he's been making videos both in Israel and in Palestine, with Israelis asking Palestinian questions and with the wider Arab community asking Israelis questions, and Israelis join him on his escapades to Palestine, and Palestinians join him on his escapades to Israel. So this is the type of innovative use of media and social networks that creates, for example, a really interesting and direct link between the Arab population on Yalla and the wider Israeli public opinion. And we've been forwarding these types of initiatives generally. So another example is that we have a monthly column on the Jerusalem Post where Arab Yalla members can address the wider Israeli community and an audience which otherwise could have no connection with them and no idea of their countries, of their culture, of their beliefs, other than mainstream media, which is many times distorted to the people behind it. So the first article was written by a Kuwaiti Yalla member named Khaled on the Arab Spring, entitled Human Rights Virtually Regained. And if you wish, I recommend you to read it. It's a very nice article. Other than that, we've also been using online media to hold conferences and events online. And we have a great partnership with an avatar technology called Shaker, which allows people to meet more face-to-face online and allows for easier going, more personal interactions between members. The first one we had was the Yalla Online Regional Peace and Economic Cooperation Conference. That was in January 2012, where the Yalla Steering Committee, which I mentioned before, which is basically active members on Yalla who want to be more active, join this steering group. And they representatives come, just for example, from Palestine, Israel, Egypt, Jordan, the Maghreb, and the Persian Gulf, so pretty much from all across the region. And they, at this conference, formulated an agenda for the future of the Middle East, which includes a declaration of principles, as well as a detailed call to action in terms of human rights, economic development, and regional peace. And it has since been conveyed to world leaders on behalf of 100,000 Yalla members, so that has power. Now I'd like to reach the main project we're currently involved in at Yalla, which has to do both with innovative use of online tools, with cultural diplomacy, and with the fact that young people in the region have shown amazing ability to impact their futures, but reform is far from being completed in the region. And their success depends highly upon their ability to translate this change into action within larger social, economic, and political systems, many of them discussed here in the past 2 days. This project is called the Yalla Young Leaders Online Academy, or YLOA, Y-L-O-A. So let me begin by speaking a bit about online studies. So the past year has seen somewhat of a revolution in online distance learning with professors, I don't know who follows, but professors from top universities leaving their position and going off to launch their own online platforms, whether it be Udacity, which was one of the first with Professor Throne from Stanford and a Google member. Now there is edX, which is a new Harvard-MIT initiative, Coursera, which is a Stanford initiative. And their aim is, all of their aims are democratizing and making widely accessible the highest level of education at low or no cost. And it has thus far attracted already hundreds of thousands of students. And this in itself is an exciting form of cultural diplomacy using online tools whereby top academics and institutes can export culture in the form of education and can do so directly to the people. So this brings me to the other interesting constituents in culture, and that is that education is part of the definition of culture and therefore should be an integral part of cultural diplomacy. So now to come back to the MENA region, to the Middle East and North Africa region, and a bit of statistic that we discussed before, but over 60% of the population in the Middle East and North Africa region is under 30, and around a third between the ages of 15 and 24. 60% of them use the internet, and use of social media and Twitter and Facebook, for example, has grown tremendously in the past few years with varying uses in different countries. And though more of the growing youth population in the region is acquiring higher education, there remains, and this was also discussed here, this incongruence between the education systems, which perhaps have not evolved as fast as the markets around them, with new introduction of technologies and prospects of integration in the world economy. And thus, many times the increase in education does not translate into higher rates of employment, and the transition between education and the workplace is a difficult one. So with all this in mind, Yala has established the Yala Academy, and we're already in progress in the process of finalizing partnerships with universities such as Princeton, Stanford, Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, University of Massachusetts, Boston, the Euro-Mediterranean University, Emuni, and the Turkish University Sabancı, as well as with the comprehensive Coursera online learning platform, which was founded by Stanford professors Kohler and Ng, and combines mastery-based learning principles with video lectures, interactive content, ensuring student engagement and effective learning, and peer-to-peer progress monitoring. And I've taken a course with them, and it's quite remarkable. So through ILOA, Yala hopes to link the Middle East and North Africa region youth with the best quality of higher education in the fields most relevant to their success as change agents, and to these institutes to which young people in the region rarely have access to. Yala is also very much aware of the need to create a link, as discussed before, again, between higher education and the private sector, or higher education and employability, and thus has partnered not only with top universities, but with private sector companies, including thus far Microsoft, HP, and Facebook, in order to provide training and skill development online relevant to the youth's employability and success in the workplace. And last but not least, with the help of the economic and academic appeal of these top universities and companies, Yala is creating ILOA as basically the first of its kind pan-regional cooperational academic structure that will serve as a cultural meeting point between the young people of the region, and thus bringing to the front cultural diplomacy not only through the education itself, but more importantly through cultural and academic exchanges between the students, which will lead to better understanding and communications, and ultimately to the goal that we at the Paris Center and Yala has always been our primary objective, which is achieving peace in the region. So I'd like to thank you again for inviting me, and I encourage you all to join as an international community.
Thank you.